Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Author of Your Own Stories, Daily Growth Hacks. I'm super excited here to have Curt with me. Curt's an entrepreneur and coach who helps business owners achieve true entrepreneurial freedom. And I know he does a lot more than that, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But I also got to say, just before we start, Curt, I'm so happy to have you here. I was on your podcast, and I've had the opportunity of just seeing the wisdom and insights that you give to business owners firsthand, which is unusual for me because we're in a mastermind group together with entrepreneurs, and you are always dropping insights and knowledge and sharing with the community. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for coming on my show and for what you do in the mastermind. It's called 10X Factory. You know, I've been in it for about a year. I kind of fell away, got back into it. And one of the things that's so incredible about it is we don't pay a ton to be in there. Everyone is extremely giving.
Yeah.
You know, it could be a rabidly competitive environment. And I'm sure some people see stuff, go back, and they're like, oh, I want to do. But the amount of calls like we're doing and reciprocal on podcasts, but I've had calls with other people on there, and there's no real expectation of a purchase or a sale. It's just helping, because some of those people, like Ali Mirza, who I had on the podcast as well, he doesn't work with people like me, but he took an hour of his time just to give me some sales advice. And so it's wonderful. And thank you, Doug, because you're dropping some knowledge bombs as well.
No, it's absolutely great. And, you know, when I was on, this is such an aside, but when I was on your show, I had a couple people go, well, why would you actually, because theoretically we were in competitive marketplaces, you know, if you look at it broadly. Sure. And you get into that scarcity mindset. So many people get into that mindset of scarcity. And my response was, there's millions and millions of business owners out there. Even if I work 24/7, I couldn't even scratch 1% of that market. And so Why wouldn't you, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Practice what you preach and go out there and help people helping other people. It just makes sense to me. And so
so I have a coach who helps. So I have a few different coaches, but coach who's turned into my best friend. And he and I, as I have kind of settled on my customer avatar persona, he and I theoretically are competitors now, you know, and you would be with him. I mean, a little bit, but there are certain people who flock to him who wouldn't flock to me because of style, because of just certain niches and things like that. And so, like you said, with an abundance mindset, there's enough to go around. And who knows, maybe we'll work together on some projects. He and I are looking at doing a retreat in Europe next year together. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you never know. Well, Curt, I know a lot about you, obviously. But let's people that don't know you. First of all, your last name, Curt, which I didn't say it, Mercadante. Yes. I just realized I didn't say it in the introduction because I always just think of you as Curt. But tell everybody, you know, how did you get here? You know, here you are as a world recognized leader in the coaching environment. How did you get to this point?
Sure. So, you know, I started, so when I was in, and I'll get to the reason I'm saying this, when I was in high school, when I was a kid, I was kind of an only child. My nearest siblings were 9 and 10 years away from me. And then I have some siblings that are 20 years ahead of me. And so I had to kind of play on my own, do a lot of, we didn't have a lot of kids in the neighborhood. And so I was the superhero and the villain in the backyard playing around. And so I had to use my creativity. When I was in high school, we had a teacher who really got me excited about politics. And to me, so I always had this feeling of saving the world. I took my son to the 40th anniversary showing of the original Superman movie the other day. Right. And as I was sitting there, I had actually never seen it on the screen because I was 3 years old when it came out. And I started watching it like when I was 5, 6 on TV, and seeing it there. I had this feeling again, this rekindled, like, oh my gosh, like I remember when he jumped out of the window and pulled open, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, I still had that feeling. And so I went into politics. I thought it was save the world. I worked on political campaigns, some tier 1 national political campaigns, U.S. Senate campaigns, veered into public relations, trade associations, and then went off and started my own public relations agency, specializing in public affairs, some political work, things like that. And about 5 years in, my revenue was really good, and I was absolutely miserable. we had started to have kids. We have 4 now, but I would go up into my home office early in the morning. I'd come down for dinner. Right after dinner, I'd go back up into the office. I'd stay up there till 4 in the morning. I'd come down. I'd fall asleep. I'd wake up at 6:30. I'd go up in the home office. I'd do it all again.
Oh.
I didn't set parameters with my clients, and clients can be like in the agency world. Well, anyways, and I say this with all due respect, they can be like dogs, Pavlovian, right? If you answer emails and calls at 11 at night, they're going to email you and call you at 11 at night. So I wanted to give it up. I wanted to shut it down. I'm going to go get a 9-to-5 job, right? And I tried a number of things and self-help programs, but a lot of them, and mostly self-help books, a lot of them try to get you to mimic behavior, systems, process that works for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So like Richard Branson is a millionaire, and he does 36 handstands in the morning. And if you do 36 handstands in the morning, you too will be, and it doesn't work that way because each of us is entirely unique.
Sure.
And so one thing that spoke to me was Gallup's Strengths Finder program. They've since rebranded it as Clifton Strengths, right?
Right.
But that's all about what's inside of you. It's not about, and a lot of people disagree with being whatever you want to be. I'm 5'4". Telling me I could be an NBA center is cruel.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, but I could be the best basketball player I can be. So it's about leveraging what's inside of you, leveraging your untapped superpowers. They call them talents, to use them intentionally to turn them into superpowers. So that started my process of building some freedom. But in 2012, my dad passed away, and we were sitting there. So my dad had this incredible career, worked on the space program, helped design fighter jets, led all the switches led the team that designed the electronic switches on the Boeing 777. So
Wow.
He was kind of this real life Tony Stark Iron Man,
Yeah.
and I kind of had that theme in my head since I was little, save the world, save the world. He passed away. And at his funeral, these grown men, 75-year-old men, were bawling, crying. No one mentioned my dad's career. They mentioned everything else: husband, father, volunteer. Now, in the first part of his career, he didn't do that, but he had an awakening in his mid-50s. He found himself out of work. He'd been president of all these companies, and he had to reinvent himself. And part of that was reinventing himself with alignment in his life. And so at that point, I realized I had built freedom, but I didn't have fulfillment. I wasn't saving the world.
Yeah.
And so it took a few more years. Some people had approached me about coaching them. I did that. And then I realized I really hate my agency. I just hate it, and some people are like, well, it was a 7-figure agency. How do you, and I had built freedom I cut the hours I was working in half in my agency. And then I about doubled my revenue by doing that, and people don't understand that, but people, why would you give it up? It's like, because I just wasn't doing what I felt I was supposed to be doing. So I was pushed into a corner one day. I had been having anxiety attacks for years. And thought I was having heart attacks, the physical, mental strain. And one morning I woke up. It was supposed to be a Thanksgiving week. It was Thanksgiving week. It was supposed to be my week off. My clients knew it. And it was a Tuesday morning, and I woke up and I laid there, and it felt like just any other work day, except it wasn't. It wasn't supposed to be.
Yep.
My clients, emails, calls, jump on the conference call, send us this memo. And the following week I was supposed to fly up to DC for a meeting, in which that same meeting the year before, we had been scolded like children for being low energy. On Monday morning at 8:30 in a 6-hour planning meeting, it was about 12 degrees outside. I had to fly in on a Sunday morning. We weren't low energy, but we were scolded. So all these thoughts are going through my head, and I walked to my wife. I said, I'm done. That's it. 7 figures, done. And she said, it's about time. And I was worried, going into it.
Yeah, sure.
And so I was like, okay, I guess this side hustle, I gotta do it now. I gotta do it full time. And so there were benefits to having no life preserver, but by the same token, I would have rather not done it that way.
Yep.
And so that's part of what I do, is try to help people sometimes build a landing strip, but also build a business in some of the ways that I didn't do. So you have that freedom, fulfillment, and that entrepreneurial freedom, which just isn't, I work for myself. I've built a prison instead of a business. It's, I work for myself, and I'm intentional. I'm in control of work, family, and self. And they all align together.
Yeah. So it was meditated. Basically, you plan this out. There's so many similarities in our story. It's really kind of eerie, but
I was thinking that as you told it on my podcast. Yeah, exactly.
So I think what I want some of the listeners to get here is, your common story, right? You're going through a struggle, and you had a realization where you just kind of like, look, this isn't worth it. At the end of the day, this is not what I want to do. And then you kind of went through a planning stage, it sounds like, where you decide, I'm going to go all in. No more toes in the water. I'm jumping head first, and I'm doing this. Is that right?
Yeah, except take out the planning stage. Take out the planning part of it. It was more, I should have had the planning stage.
Okay.
I should have built it in, and it was more, I had a 3-year plan. That was in my head, but it wasn't really a plan. It was more fear.
Yep.
Well, I'll ramp down the agency while I ramp it up. Mm-hmm. And it became apparent that ain't going to happen because you keep saying next month and next month. And then you get the paycheck. My process, it turned into an overnight process of I'm done. Now I got to coach. I had been coaching, but now it was full time. So I wish I had the planning. I tell people, let's build a planning process. Yeah. But I also, too many people get stuck in the planning process, I find, and they need kind of my dose of tear the Band-Aid off, massive action now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a common thread. We were talking offline. I got back from co-leading a men's retreat, and every one of the men that were there were phenomenal men, business leaders, but all had the similar fear. An underlying current is what I call it, a fear that was running the show. And what's kind of funny is several of them, I can't give away what we do at the retreat, but several of them came to the realization that, like you did when they approached their significant other and said, hey, look, geez, I'm going to do this, and expecting that person to push back. The other person said the same thing similar, like, geez, it's about time. They see it so often before we do.
Yeah. And that point about your significant other, your spouse, partner, whatever, I had assigned thoughts that my wife was having that she wasn't having. Mm-hmm. And she had probably seen things that she didn't say to me. So it was communication by passive aggressive comment or snipe, right? And I find that I had one client whose wife was a physician, so making good money. Yep. He was doing some things that might, in the short term, bring down his income in order for long-term gain. And he was worried, my wife feels like I'm, freeloading. I said, well, did she say that? Well, no. Why don't you go talk to her? And he talked to her. He's like, oh, no, she said, do whatever I want. There was no communication. And I told one client who was in the midst of really upending his career and life in a good way. I said, starting today, this is our first session. You have to let your wife in on everything we're doing, on your thoughts, on your feelings. And he came to me a week ago and he was like, you've really helped save my marriage because I'm not nervous about telling her things now, and she feels like a valued member of the team, and people just don't do that often. I don't want to say everyone, but often we don't do that even when we think we are. It's just this passive aggressive, I'm going to quit my job. Oh, you. And then, and that's it.
It's very true. And it's interesting. And, you work with business owners, and let me ask you if you find this true is, with business owners, what I find is oftentimes, for people listening to this that want to become entrepreneurs, take this as a warning sign, is they use business for significance, and they let their relationships go usually first, and then oftentimes also their health, until it's become such an issue that they're forced to face it.
Totally, 100%. And that's part of, so a lot of people are chasing work-life balance, and I always say that's BS. Mm-hmm. It's really, because there's not work over here and life over here. There's just life. But I say that it's alignment between your work, your family, and yourself. We do an activity called the pizza pie, where you draw a circle in the middle of the paper, you draw slices, and a slice for work, family, and self, but you have to draw the pie, the slices in direct proportion to how you honestly spend your time and your mind share, and then redraw it the way you want it to be. And, I've worked with moms who quite honestly need to make their family slice smaller.
Yeah.
And their family will thank them for it.
Yeah.
And they feel guilty about increasing the self. Men, 99.9% of men need to decrease the work. Some of them are okay on the self, quite honestly, but the family, and they rationalize this balance. Balance in their mind is, well, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to ignore everything else for a week or two. And then I'm going to come up for air, and then I'm going to enjoy it. Then that turns into, I'm going to do that for a year. Then we're going to go on vacation. And then we're going to be fine. Then it turns into 5 years, turns into when I'm 65, I'll retire and I'll enjoy life. And then knee replacement, stroke, cancer. I mean, that's just all stuff that has happened to members of my family. And why wait till 65 to enjoy life? Right?
Yes.
I mean, your journey is you're traveling around, right? I mean, you've settled now, but I take it, or for what it sounds like, you're going to pick up and go somewhere else next at some undetermined point of time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I came to a very similar realization. I was, a lot of people know my story, but I was very fortunate at a young age, early 20s, to be surrounded by, very successful people who are much older and were my best friends, despite the age difference. I mean, 2-3 times my age. And I was seeing their misery and their success, and seeing, people all of a sudden getting a heart attack that were, were somewhat healthy, and all these things were happening. And that's when the realization is like, look, let's just say you're sleeping 8 hours, right? Most people sleep like 6, maybe. We talk about entrepreneurs. You were on like the 3-hour, 2-hour program. But let's say you're working 8 hours. Say you're sleeping 8 hours, and say you're working 8 hours, just randomly. And then of course you have lunches and breaks. Well, that's the majority of your time is spent, right? Your waking hours are spent theoretically working. And in this day and age, most people are pushing the envelope, working at least 10 hours, even in a normal job, just to keep up. So now you're telling me the majority of your waking hours are spent doing something you absolutely hate, and tomorrow, or even today, are not guaranteed for you. And that has to make just a radical shift right away. Whatever, whether you're forced to do it like kind of you were, or you make a conscious, plan, kind of the way that I ended up doing, or you just say, look, I'm just not taking this anymore. Something needs to shift, and I'm going to force myself to make that change. It just has to happen.
Yeah. And it's about being intentional. I call it living an outcomes focused life, a radically outcomes focused life, where you are, do you have to quit your job in order to have freedom in your life? Absolutely not. But if you're in a job, working for someone else where they judge you every day on arbitrary inputs, rather than allowing you to use your superpowers to accomplish key outcomes, then you're not going to be happy and switch careers. I had a client who was kind of on his way maybe to starting his own business, and we kind of realized that's probably not for you, actually.
Yeah.
You just need to get a new job, but we need to be intentional about, don't just jump from one prison to another. And, but when you do jump, you have to, like you said, be intentional that you're not creating a prison like I did, I did an AMA in 10X Factory. And I was talking about, the fact that I set a goal of only working 12 hours per week. And people are so stuck on the arbitrary input of 8 hours a day that I actually posted on LinkedIn, and somebody was quoting Psalms. I've read the Bible cover to cover, but I don't memorize specific. But this person quoted, something in Psalms about the men shall work 8 hours in the fields. Or so. I said, that's not a requirement. It wasn't a requirement of working 8 hours. And someone on the AMA said, my dad told me that it's a man's job. Part of being a man is working 8 hours. He said, I come into the office. He owns his own company, and I work 7 and 9 hours. I said, okay, that's great. How much actual outcomes focused work do you get done each day? Talk about 2 to 3 hours. So I said, why do you waste that other part of hours? He said, well, what would I do with the rest of my time? Would I just waste away? I said, okay, that's the problem. People can't imagine filling their life. You have to identify what fulfills you. Is it reading? Is it time with your kids, time with your wife, walks on the beach, running, biking, whatever it is, right? You got to identify that, so you fill up your time with that. Secondly, why are you doing that? And he said, well, because of what my dad told me, that to be a man, routine. Maybe I feel a responsibility that I got to show my face around the office. Those are all inputs.
Yep.
Those are not part of your outcomes. And once you set those outcomes and then reverse engineer it and find the straightest, shortest line, simplest line to those outcomes, you realize that 70 to 80% of your day is utter BS.
Yep.
Right? And you focus on that 20%, 30%, you're getting more done, and you're happier, you're more fulfilled.
Absolutely. And do you find that a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, tie their identity so closely to their business and their significance in the world that they feel that they have to keep grinding it out because that's their identity?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. And it's the way we're raised since we're kids. And it's, we homeschool our kids. And the number one question people ask us, what about socialization? And it's funny because in his book, Flow, I can't pronounce his name. What is it? Michael.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
CZY, lots of vowels, right?
Yeah.
He describes socialization as really kind of being trapped by societal norms of this kind of Pavlovian rewards and punishments. I shall sit in my classroom for 8 hours. I shall go to this type of school. I shall major in finance because so-and-so majored in finance. I shall go to this school. And then they get to 40 or 50 and they come to you or I. Yep. Right? I'm living the life that my parents told me, well-meaning, because societal norms tell them, of course, conformity is the way to success. And now I think there's been an awakening for all. Listen, are there issues with every generation? Yes. Are there quirks? Are there issues with the millennial generation? Yes. They're different. They're not bad. They're not good. Some things drive me up the wall. But what's incredible is that they're not settling for a lack of fulfillment. Now, some of them need to really learn that, okay, you're 22. You got to determine what fulfillment is before saying, Simon Sinek talks about this, right? They're in a job for 2 months and I'm going to change. Why? Well, because I'm not leading the company already. And I'm not really making an impact. It's like, you got to define what that is, right? There's certain things, but they're not settling for that anymore. And that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think they got to learn a little bit from the older generation about embracing the suck in a way that doesn't do damage. But I think the older generation needs to learn about embracing the suck without doing damage. You know what I mean? So
yeah. It is really interesting to see. And I've had a couple clients who are in their early 20s, that I've worked with, and it's a similar idea. And they're like, oh, I should be at this place. I should have the next this way. And they're very successful already at an early age. And oftentimes one of the things I ask them is I say, look, is there wisdom in somebody older than you? Because there's so much resentment in people that are older or younger, comes either way, right? And I'm like, look, would you let a 15-year-old, do you know more than a 15-year-old does? Just because of your tires on the road, your mileage.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the same way. So look at your boss or somebody else. And so, because I know we have a lot of intrapreneurs, so to speak, listening to this. Look at the people, your management or people that are above you, and you can learn something from everybody. Take the good and moving forward. And the reverse happens true, right? I'm in my 40s. And so oftentimes when I work with my staff, I'm always learning. I mean, geez, there's so much to be learned from each person, their life experiences, their story. In a lot of cases for me, social media, getting heavy into Instagram, and it's all, it's just a fun little adventure for me, but you can always learn from everybody.
Yeah. The number one thing that I've learned over the years, or the lesson, is that I don't know everything. Because I was an arrogant prick in my early 20s. Yeah. And I wanted to run things, and I wanted to own my own company. And I see some of these, they're like 22. What do? I'm a life coach. Mm-hmm. But you haven't lived life. All right, if you want to life coach a 15-year-old, that's great. And, now that I'm in my 40s, I'm more curious than ever.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, certain people are going to have to figure things out. But I see some of these like on LinkedIn that they're posting, like we talked about the grind porn, and the guy who I like, but he is posting how proud he is that he got 2 hours of sleep the night before. He posts pictures, and I went through this, right? And I remember it, and it made me cringe. And I talked to someone else who spent a year of his life in going to every chemo session with his mom. And my dad dying from cancer, I sat in the hospital, and I made these mistakes where he'll post pictures with pride where his dad is there in the bed, and you could see his dad off to the side, chemo, and he's got the video editing computer open. It's like, still grinding, never stops. And I cringe because I did that. Yeah. And I look back on that, I'm like, I will never have that time back. But if you bring it up, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm grinding. To each his own. I'm like, right, to each his own. but you're going to figure it out someday.
Yeah.
You're going to look back on that. I cut my honeymoon short in half because I had a new job. Hate it. I kicked myself for it. We went with one of our kids. My wife had a C-section. She has bad reactions to anesthesia, so it wasn't pretty. 5 minutes later, hey, sorry, I got to go to a conference call. And you're in the moment. You're like, I'm grinding. This is what I got to do. I identify as a business owner only. And I look back on that and I wish someone had punched me in the face.
Yeah.
And just said, you're a schmuck, man. What are you doing? And, you got to break that pattern. You need someone else to help break that pattern. And because you rationalize it and rationalize it and rationalize it. This is what you have to do. This is what you got to do. And it's not.
No, not at all. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, I know you've gotten a little flack about sharing your story, from people who don't get the fact that you're sharing your story from your personal experience so other people don't have to go through it. And there's so many people out there, the talking heads, so to speak, in the business world right now. It's all about grind. You got to grind. I work harder than anybody. And every new entrepreneur, not everyone, but a lot of them feel the same way. I did it, right? I can out hustle everybody. I'll out hustle my competition. If they're working 7 hours, I'm going to work 10. If they're working 15, I'll work 20, whatever it may be. I think people like yourself that are sharing your story and the intimate parts of your story that you're not proud of is a reality call and a wake-up call to so many people. So thank you so much for doing that and being the beacon of light.
No, well, likewise. And I remember when you were on the podcast, you shared the story about the client that you had. The fitness client when you were back in Santa Barbara, right? Who said, no, you just be happy. You sit and you keep doing this and you make your money, you keep your head down, and that's the way to do it.
Yep.
And that was, I don't want to say for good or for bad. I don't blame them, but for a generation that grew up whose either parents or them went through some pretty rough times, that's what you had to do back then. It was a different time. Now we don't have to do that as much. But, when you're in the Depression, I'm going to start my own IT company. No, it's just it's a different way of doing things. So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, we have more connection now. I mean, look, you and I are in different parts of the United States right now. I was literally playing with my son, running around the kitchen, come down here and to have a conversation with somebody like yourself. And then after this, I get to go walk on the beach with my wife, right? Those opportunities didn't exist. And that's where I think a lot of people listening that are going, should I jump in? Should I not? Obviously, plan, figure it out. But the opportunity that presents itself to be able to work 12 hours a week in your case, that's there right now, which wasn't there previously. So there gets to become a paradigm shift for a lot of people out there.
Yeah. It's we talk about, first of all, you saying going and walking on the beach made me cringe because it's probably about 20 degrees there. And it's like, oh my God.
It's sunny though.
So Bruce Lee has a quote that it's not about the increase, it's about the daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential, the inessential. I think he said unessential. Is that a word?
It is now.
When I was in track, we used to, I remember going to cross country camp actually, and they would film us and they would just have us run our normal stride length and everything, 100 meters. Then they would film it. And they would say, well, why is your hand going out here? Why is your head going back and forth? You're wasting energy. Pinch your fingers because there's not as much blood flow. If you clench your fists, there's blood flow. I'm in boxing now. Mm-hmm. And they're like, just don't really clench the fist until the point of impact because it's quicker. So you start saving energy on all those excess movements. You stop those excess movements and you actually do better. It's not just about saving time. It's actually do better. And so a lot of people, like you said, have that mentality where you work 7 hours, I'm going to work 10. Mine is now it's a competition with myself. Well, you work 7 hours, I'm going to work 3. And it's like I want to compile it and get a greater impact from it. And when you change that mindset, it's really you got to be careful, right? Because then it almost becomes a prison in and of itself because it's like, oh, I worked 2 hours and 20 minutes instead of 2. Okay. that was fine. You just chill out, but it's a different mindset, and it takes a while to get there.
Well, yeah, it does. And the guy who I really respect is Keith Cunningham. And he has a book called The Road Less Stupid. It's a great title, but but it's about his business mistakes, and it's all about scheduling thinking time into your calendar as a business owner. And the whole book gives you questions, and I recommend it to business owners to go through it. And then you and I talked about this before, I believe, but the most seminal book in business and personal development out there is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Rather than, it's not hustle and grow rich, grind and grow rich, think and grow rich. And people miss that opportunity that, as a business owner yourself, an entrepreneur, and someone who coaches business owners, you get, when you sit back and you actually think, meditate, walk on the beach, go for a run or boxing even, right? Those ideas just flow through you. They don't happen when you're sitting at your computer typing away or whatever it is you're doing. They flow through you at times of peace and doing something different. And so a lot of people, if you're grinding, you miss that opportunity for those golden nuggets.
Yeah. There's a great book by someone I got to know on LinkedIn, and he's up in he's in DC. It's called The Creative Curve. His name's Alan Gannett.
Okay.
And he, it's all about the myth that creative people, not just writers and artists, but chefs, creative people in business, there's this myth of they were struck by lightning with this great idea. And he starts off by talking about Paul McCartney. Who does he talk about? He talks about, Paul McCartney and Let It Be, I believe, right? And how that came to him. And it not only took years of him kind of just playing with this song, he traces it back to when he was a kid and his dad was playing in jazz clubs. And they trace some of the notes and some of the melody in it going back to probably it was based on, so it was all these things that were in his head. And so he gets into left brain versus right brain. And I can't remember which is which, but there's a reason that when you're out for a run, that all of a sudden you seem like you're struck with this idea. It's because I can't remember. It's either the left brain or the right brain shuts down. And so it's not that the other side is like shooting to the top. It's just that it's here. The other side of your brain just kind of goes down, or when you're in the shower.
Yeah.
And so it's always there in the back of your consciousness, but it's just the other stuff that you're stimulated by around you just kind of falls down. And so it's interesting to what you say. And I read that. I'm like, that can totally be applied, not just to creativity, but like you said, flow, and just that state of flow and doing some things. I'm reading that book Flow now. I read it 10 years ago and I'm reading it again because it really is important to get yourself into that state where things just seem to come easily. Mm-hmm. Like you're not, like you said, you're not just sitting there. What do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do? You're never going to, you're clenched, when your butt cheeks are so clenched, you're never going to think of that idea. Go for a run, go for a walk, go spend time with your kids. And it's amazing that Sean Acor has done a lot with this too. The happiness advantage about get up from your desk and go do something else. And then you're going to come back and it's going to flow so much more easily.
Yeah. And the more you're in that flow state, it's like working out or boxing, right? You throw your punch, you throw your jab over and over and over again, and then it becomes reflexive. And that flow state can be just more of a natural state for you. It may feel weird, the first time you throw, your jab, you're not turning it over properly, or what, your coach is yelling at you.
Right.
'Cause I did the same. And, but after a while it becomes just a reflexive thing, as long as you're getting your reps in.
Yeah. I've taken a year and a half off of sparring, and tonight I'm going back.
Okay. All right.
I've been practicing, but with sparring, it's a different level. Things happen. You get in that ring, your adrenaline starts going even before the bell is rung, and things start happening because your adrenaline's going so fast. You've tired yourself out quickly, and things start happening very fast. And you realize the ring isn't as big as it looks. And it's like someone's trying to hit me. And now you're sparring. If you're in distress, you can go down.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in that mindset. And so I got very frustrated a year and a half ago. And I stopped doing it. And what I realized, you got to keep doing it. You got to keep. And so it's a difference between training and learning how to throw the jab and then taking it and applying it and doing that over and over. There's different steps of repetition. There's the practicing, and then you go, you can practice every day on your keys on the piano. Go out and do it in front of people. That's a different level. And then just keep doing that. And then you got to, some people don't get out of the practicing alone stage, and you got to move on, keep moving up the piece. But yeah, so tomorrow you may see a LinkedIn video. I may have a broken nose and
hopefully you're delivering flowers to somebody else.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, Curt, I know you and I could talk forever about this, and I would love to it, but I want to be respectful of your time, and thank you so much for the wisdom you share. I feel like I keep saying that, but I think it's rare to find someone like yourself that's out there helping people and delivering what I consider the right message out there. For those that want to know more about you and what you're doing and where to find you, where are the best places?
Yeah, so my website, curtmercadante.com, Curt with a C, C-U-R-T, and then Mercadante. It's like Merca, M-E-R-C-A, and then Dante, like Dante's Inferno.com. Everything's there. I'm on LinkedIn, very active there. And yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, Doug. And, in 10X Factory, I kind of, like I said, I went away, came back, and I went away and there was no mindset channel. And I don't know if it was you that started the mindset channel, but I came back and someone said, look at what Doug's putting in the mindset channel. So I came back. I'm like, this is awesome. This is excellent. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody else, I'll just throw a plug out there for the 10X guys. It's a fantastic entrepreneur. It's a fantastic group that's out there as well. So Curt, thanks again. And I'm sure we will have you on again to follow up, because I'm sure we'll get tons of questions and more responses. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Doug.
At Author of Your Own Story, we believe in taking a holistic approach to your health, where you aren't just physically healthy, but your entire mind, body, and soul is operating at its most optimal level. To get started in creating holistic health, download our free holistic health checklist at authorofyourownstory.com/body-gift. And don't forget to be the author of your own story.